In 1330, Mortimer made his final mistake. He declared himself Lord of Ireland, seized new lands without royal approval, and executed several noblemen without trial. He even sent spies into Edward III's chambers. It was clear Mortimer did not intend to give up power. Isabella, by now weary and isolated, refused to stop him. Whether out of love or fear, she remained quiet, and so her son made a decision. On the night of October 19, 1330, just after Edward III turned 18, he struck. With the help of loyal allies, Edward stormed Nottingham Castle, arrested Mortimer in his chambers, seized Isabella's royal seal, and declared his personal rule of England. Mortimer was taken in chains. Isabella, though not imprisoned, was stripped of all authority. She begged her son to spare her lover. Edward refused. In November 1330, Roger Mortimer was dragged to the Tower of London. He was tried for the murder of Edward II, the usurpation of royal power, treason against the realm. He was found guilty and hanged at Tyburn, like a common criminal. His body was left on display for days. Isabella was not seen in public for months. She had risen like flame. Now, she faded like ash. The woman who broke a king now watched her empire crumble from behind closed doors. And yet, her legend was not over. For even fallen queens cast long shadows. She had once crossed oceans, commanded armies, and broken kings. But now, the voice of England's most dangerous woman echoed only through stone corridors. Isabella of France was not imprisoned in iron, but in memory. It was over. Roger Mortimer was dead. Isabella's regency was ended. Edward III now ruled alone. And the woman who had once ruled England, queen, mother, commander, destroyer, was quietly placed in semi-exile. Not in a dungeon, not in chains, but in Castle Rising, a cold windswept estate in Norfolk. Far from court, far from her son, far from everything. The Queen Mother is to live with comfort, Edward III declared, but without influence. She had no authority, no counsel, and no voice in royal decisions. Castle Rising was more palace than prison. But its walls were high and its rooms echoed with silence. Isabella lived there with a small staff of loyal attendants, her own personal confessor, books, relics, and the few letters allowed to reach her. She rarely spoke of her past. She refused to have her portrait painted. She walked the stone halls at dawn, hooded, whispering prayers no one could hear. Some days she fasted for hours. Other days she raged at nothing. One servant wrote, "Her grace is both queen and ghost. She sleeps little, she dreams much." She was now in her 50s, but in her mind she lived elsewhere. She spoke sometimes to Roger Mortimer's name, whispering apologies or asking forgiveness. She kept a carved wooden box containing a piece of his red cloak, a letter from her son as a child, and a rosary given by her mother, Queen Joan of Navarre. Sometimes she would pause in front of a mirror, touch her aged face and mutter, "Is that the girl who was sent away?" She had not seen France in 30 years. She never returned. Her relationship with Edward III was strained, but not broken. He visited once in P. By 1355, Isabella had grown frail. She rarely left her chambers. Her hair turned silver. Her hands trembled. She suffered from what modern historians might call depression, perhaps even dementia. She spoke more to saints than servants. And yet, she retained her dignity. She insisted Mass be said daily. She kept flowers, fresh cut, at her bedside. And on clear nights she would sit by the window, staring at the stars, whispering the names of those long gone: Edward, Gaveston, Mortimer, Father, France. On August 22, 1358, Isabella of France died peacefully in her bed at Castle Rising. No royal court marked her passing. No great funeral parade. No public mourning. And yet Edward III ordered she be buried with full honors, not as a traitor, not as a regent, but as Queen of England. She was laid to rest at Greyfriars Church, London, in a fine tomb beside the very man she had overthrown. Edward II. Buried with her were her royal mantle, a crucifix, and reportedly Roger Mortimer's heart, sealed in a silver casket. Whether true or myth, it became part of her story. Centuries later, historians still debated her legacy. Was she a power-hungry traitor, a revolutionary queen who defied a cruel king, a victim turned weapon, a mother who broke history to protect her son? Perhaps. She was all. But one truth remained. Isabella of France, one chronicler wrote, was not a woman to be forgotten. She carved her name with fire and paid for it with silence. She lived in shadow. She ruled in vengeance. She died in silence. But Isabella of France, the she-wolf of England, left behind more than scandal. She left behind a crown reborn and a son who would become one of England's greatest kings. When a queen dies, the world forgets. But when a queen breaks history, history cannot forget her. Isabella of France, the she-wolf, the traitor queen, the avenging mother, left behind not just scandal, but a new England. After her death in 1358, Isabella of France was quietly buried at Greyfriars Church in London. There was no royal spectacle. No grieving crowds. No monuments praising her reign. The chroniclers of the time, mostly men, mostly clergy, began a slow poisoning of her legacy. She became the Jezebel of England, the she-wolf of France, the queen who slept with a traitor, the murderer of a king. They painted her not as a political actor, but as a woman ruled by lust, ambition, and revenge. Her real accomplishments: the first queen to depose a reigning king, the savior of a crown, the mother of a strong monarch, were buried beneath moral condemnation. For centuries, Isabella's story was told by men who feared what she represented: a woman who challenged her husband, a queen who ruled without a man, a mother who put her son on the throne by force. And so they emphasized the scandal, her affair with Mortimer, the brutal death of Edward II, her arrogance in ruling England as if she were king. But they ignored the truths: that she was married at 12, used as a pawn, that her husband neglected, humiliated, and endangered her, that she endured years of surveillance, emotional abuse, and isolation. Few wrote of the personal cost of her rebellion. Isabella's legacy wasn't just personal. It was constitutional. Her rebellion proved that a king could be overthrown, a queen could act as a political leader, a child heir could be placed on the throne with parliamentary support. This was a turning point in English monarchy, where power began to shift from divine rule to political accountability. Even if she was never formally crowned ruler, Isabella's regency was a precedent. It opened the door for the future regency of Margaret of Anjou, the Tudor queens, and, centuries later, the rise of Elizabeth I. She shattered the mold of the medieval woman, and though it cost her everything, it changed everything. Her son, Edward III, would go on to become one of England's greatest monarchs. Under his reign, England entered the 100 Years' War, the Order of the Garter was established. Parliament grew in power, and the medieval English identity solidified. Edward was bold, decisive, and aware of image and authority. And yet, much of what made him king came from Isabella. Her diplomatic cunning, her understanding of power and loyalty, her use of spectacle and message. In many ways, Isabella raised a warrior king, one who learned from both her victories and her mistakes. Isabella's fall, the arrest of Mortimer, her loss of power, became a warning. Future queens were told, "Remember, Isabella, know your place." And yet, they also studied her. Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry VII, followed Isabella's model in building alliances and securing her son's crown. Elizabeth I, centuries later, would face comparisons to Isabella and reject them with care. "I am not my namesake. I wear my father's sword," she once said, distancing herself from a woman who ruled through the heart. But the truth remained. Isabella had dared, and the crown had changed because of her. In the 16th century, Greyfriars Church was destroyed during the Reformation. Isabella's tomb, like so many, was lost, her body unmarked, her grave scattered. What remained were only stories, many of them false, many twisted. But in the silence of modern scholarship, her voice began to rise again. Feminist historians in the 20th and 21st centuries reclaimed her narrative. As a survivor of abuse, as a strategic ruler, as a mother who chose political justice over royal obedience, she was not perfect. But she was never ordinary. Today, Isabella is no longer just the SheWolf. She is a symbol of how history silences powerful women. A case study in female rulership in a patriarchal system, a reminder that behind every scandal is a human life, shaped by pain, politics, and purpose. Her story is studied in gender studies programs, royal politics seminars, medieval power dynamics courses, and more than ever, people ask not, how could she? But, what choice did she have? Strip away the titles, queen, traitor, regent, SheWolf, and what remains is a woman, born to a cold, calculating father, married to a man who ignored and isolated her, torn between crown and conscience, who risked everything for her child, and lived long enough to see herself become the villain. She is not easily categorized, she is not easily forgiven, but she is deeply human, and perhaps that is the most radical thing a medieval queen could be. In the broken stones of a vanished tomb, in the pages of rewoven history, in the blood of kings yet to come, Isabella of France endures, not in gold nor in glory, but in the question she forces us to ask: what does it cost a woman to survive power